Here's the interesting thing about how the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are covering Michael Cohen, because he was caught in an outright lie yesterday.
He was caught in two outright lies. Yeah. He was caught in two outright lies
and stealing from Donald Trump. And the New York Times reports, well, at least he kept his cool.
And I'll get into Cohen's testimony. So since I was here last week, right? Last week, I think my sort of summation for your listeners was, so far the prosecution has sort of kept this on the rails, right? It's not a great case, but they were doing sort of what they needed to do to have a chance at a conviction. This was the end. Friday to yesterday with Michael Cohen's testimony was an unmitigated disaster for the prosecution in this case. And frankly, I don't know how the New York Times, I haven't looked at the New York Times's summary, but if that's actually their coverage,
yes,
they're doing their readers a disservice, because their readers are going to wonder how the hell this guy got acquitted.
Right.
Because after Cohen's testimony, you don't have to like Donald Trump. You can actually hate Donald Trump actively, right? If you're sitting in that jury, I don't know how you credit a thing that Michael Cohen has told you. And the problem with that is that Michael Cohen is the only witness that is able to say Donald Trump knew what was going on with these payments. If you don't believe Michael Cohen, you can't convict Donald Trump. And so what Donald Trump's legal team, and I like lawyers who are really, really good, and I knew nothing about Todd Blanche before this trial. Todd did an absolute, I don't know him from Adam, right? But just a masterful job with Michael Cohen and cross-examine. He's clearly a very good lawyer, and just eviscerated the guy's credibility.
So this is from the Washington Post. Cohen finished 4 days of testimony on Monday, telling the jury that he was acting at Trump's direction when he arranged a $130,000 payment. But they brought up the fact that there were certain times where Cohen had been invoicing the Trump operation for additional money than he was actually paying out, one being to Redfin to manipulate a poll.
Close to Red Finch.
That's right. Red Finch.
Red Finch. And Red Finch did a bunch of different technology and financial work for the Trump organization. But Michael Cohen, so he, by the way, the reason why this was especially damaging is he lumped this payment together with the Stormy Daniels reimbursement, right? Alleged Stormy Daniels reimbursement. And so there was an invoice from this company called Red Finch. It doesn't really matter what they were doing, but it was they were doing something at Mr. Cohen's behest.
They were manipulating the poll.
Exactly. Yeah, they were manipulating a poll and being paid to do it.
Right.
And so they invoiced the Trump organization $50,000, right, for that cost. Cohen apparently says, okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and report that they invoiced us a full $50,000 and ask for that $50,000 as reimbursement to me, so I can go make the payment. He got the $50,000. He also got the $130,000 for the payment to Stormy Daniels, allegedly, according to his testimony. And he lumps them together, and he only pays Red Finch $20,000.
Right.
Gets Red Finch to settle the invoice for $20,000. Says, hey, $50,000 is too much. I'm not going to pay you all of that.
Well, and Trump wasn't happy with Red Finch's services. So
exactly.
He wanted to win this poll on top executive in the 20th century or something on CNBC.
That's right.
And, look, I've been around guys like Trump, and they're a little eclectic. Like, they get like these little pet projects.
Totally.
And I was working on a movie promotion one time, and this guy reminds me a lot of Donald Trump, very wealthy, very successful. And one day he called me and was like, Jeff, tomorrow I want to screen my film in Times Square. And I will, and you're like, Okay. And he's like, I will pay you. Go. And you're like, all right. And you got to try to find people. We're finding a movie theater in Times Square and all this stuff to try to put together. And I jumped on a plane from DC overnight. And so these guys sometimes get like a little eclectic and they get like hyper focused on a little project. So you go out there and you try to deliver for your client.
Right.
And in this case, Trump's not happy with Reg Finch, so he doesn't want to pay him anything. But Michael Cohen invoices him for $50,000 anyways, and settles with Reg Finch for
20. So exactly, 20. Michael Cohen uses Donald Trump's peak to negotiate the bill down to $20,000 with Reg Finch. Right? Reg Finch says, "Fine, we'll take less than half of what we charge you."
Yeah.
Michael Cohen tells the Trump organization, "Sorry, they wouldn't move on the bill. We got to pay him." Right? So the Trump organization pays him the full 50. He gives Reg Finch 20, pockets the 30. That is theft, right? I mean, that is you don't need to go to law school to know what that is. That's stealing. That is theft. And it's theft by deception.
Yeah.
Right. It is a bigger felony in New York than what Trump is accused of. And Michael Cohen is asked directly, "So you stole from the Trump organization?" "Yes, I did." That was his answer. "Yes, I did, sir." Right. And I don't know that's as close to in a modern trial as a Perry Mason moment, right? As you're gonna get, right? Where you could hear a pin drop in a courtroom because we've just watched some guy's guts get laid out in the middle of the courtroom. Credibility-wise,
the key witness to testify against Donald Trump has not only been found to lie with regards to the October 24th call,
26th,
October 26th call, and then now has admitted to stealing from the organization, and we're supposed to trust his testimony against the president of the United States.
Well, and that's actually, I'm glad you brought up the lie about the call on the 26th, because I actually think that is the worst thing that happened to him.
Really?
Because look, this call, let's remember what Michael Cohen testified to. If your listeners haven't been following it that closely, I think it was on Thursday last week, or maybe, it was Thursday last week. Michael Cohen, his testimony led up to, and on the 26th of October, I called Donald Trump. I remember this call. It was in the evening, right? I called him and I told him, the money to Stormy has been paid. It's taken care of, right? Why is that so important? Because look, there's no question Stormy Daniels received, and by the way, this leaves aside whether the payment was even illegal, even if Trump knew about it, right? We discussed that last week. There's a real argument. I mean, these sorts of payments get made all the time. But let's imagine for a minute that payment is illegal. Donald Trump has to know it was made, right? Donald Trump has to know that it was made and has to know that the books were cooked in order to hide the purpose of the payment. And the only piece of testimony, the only piece of direct testimony in this trial that connects Donald Trump to that payment, and knowing that Michael Cohen was going to hide it as quote unquote legal services on the books, is this call on the 26th. And what did Trump's attorney expose? The call on the 26th wasn't to Trump at all. It was to Trump's bodyguard complaining about a 14-year-old who was prank calling Michael Cohen and irritating him.
Can we just stop for a second and reflect on the fact that we don't know who this 14-year-old is? Because at this point, they're now an adult, right? Because this was, I would really like to know who this person is. Because if you're 14 years old, we were talking a little bit about this. When I was 14 years old, I was not prank phone calling lawyers for the president of the United States. I was prank phone calling the 7-Eleven on the corner.
No, 100%. This guy, this 14-year-old, whoever this person was, I would bet they're wildly successful now. Right? Yeah. It's a very precocious 14-year-old.
It's like it's the Bart Simpson of this case. Who is the Bart Simpson that's calling Moe's Tavern?
Well, and the best part is, like, it lives for, like, this person is, I hope, privately laughing somewhere, right? Because what they did is living forever in these texts, right? And it became, there's just something so small, right? Because what Donald Trump's lawyers really did a good job of was making Michael Cohen small.
Yes.
Right? Turning him into a petty, which, by the way, I think unfortunately lines up. You could say, hey, look, if I was in Michael Cohen's shoes, I'd be feeling pretty petty and vindictive. Fair enough, right? I think that's fine. But they've made him small. they've made him into and the way they contrasted with, so you're grifting $30,000 lying to your company, and you're whining to your boss's bodyguard that a 14-year-old won't stop calling you and you want it to stop. And by the way, you're lying to this jury that was the call where you told Donald Trump, okay? This is going to be the closing argument, right? And then you lied to the jury that was the call where you told Donald Trump. This is the magical call where you told him about these payments and that you were going to cook the books. Come on. I don't see how a jury believes it.
So fireworks yesterday with the first witness, I believe, or maybe it was the second witness as the defense, called Robert Costello. Infuriated the judge. What happened there?
So Robert Costello was a lawyer for Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen waived his attorney-client privilege to Mr. Costello. And so, by the way that works, just for your listeners, so if you're the client, you own the attorney-client privilege. The client can keep a lawyer from testifying, right? If a client says, actually, lawyer, I would like you to go testify, right? Then the lawyer has to go testify. If the lawyer is a witness and has heard stuff that's relevant, even in the attorney-client relationship, if the client is saying, I don't care about any of that, I don't want it.
Why would Cohen do that?
He did it in cooperating with prosecutors, right? And so, once you waive it, it's waived forever. It's gone, right?
So both sides can then access. Yeah.
That's
okay.
Exactly
gotcha.
Right. So anyway, this is Michael Cohen's former attorney, basically testifying that what Cohen just testified to is not at all what he heard. And so, in the middle of his testimony, this guy's a lawyer, remember, and there were objections being made by the prosecution to some of the questions that were being asked of him by the defense. And Judge Merchan was sustaining many of those objections. That means saying the prosecution's right, move on to a different question. And eventually, I guess he started clearing his throat or saying, come on, something like that.
Rolling his eyes.
And the judge...
I've got teenagers at home. I know that.
Yeah, exactly. The judge cleared the courtroom and instructed him not to do that. And apparently, at some point, he thought that Costello was just staring at him too directly, and he asked him if he was staring at him. And of course, we don't have cameras in the courtroom, right? So we can't know if that actually happened. But that's another new one in this trial. I've never heard of a witness staring a judge down. I've never heard of it.
So reading that, look, both these guys are in the New York legal profession, right? Yeah. So they're at the same cocktail parties. The sense I got reading that was these guys, they know each other. They've been in the field. They've been around each other long enough. And it was stop with the BS type of stare down. And the fact that the witness kind of elevated himself to being able to do that against the judge, that the judge was like, that's the nerve point, right? That's the pressure point. That's where the first time you've seen Merchan shut down the trial, kick everybody out, have the conversation, right? Yeah. Like that's a different level than, just some witness that came in off the street, or it seemed way more personal.
I think that's reasonable speculation. That's possible. These guys seem like they're around the same age, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
they may, the lawyer may know the judge from before he was a judge, right? So who knows? But I'll just say that, I think that so far Costello's testimony has been also very good for the defense. And after Cohen has been made into a liar, right, it's a lot easier to believe his lawyer when his lawyer says, look, actually, what this guy told me was that he kept Trump in the dark about all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah, clearly he's taking money from the company.
Bingo.
All right. Brad Smith. I don't know if this name came across your desk, but yesterday he was tweeting that he was essentially going to be the expert witness on FEC law.
Right.
And that because there were so many restrictions that the judge and the prosecution were going to try to put on his testimony, that the Trump team just decided not to call him.
Right.
Can you give any background on that?
Yeah, sure. So Brad Smith is an expert in campaign finance law, right? And he's nationally known. Lots of people work with him if they've got cases in front of the Federal Election Commission, right? So this is a bona fide expert in federal election regulations. Look, like, I actually think that the issue of I think him not testifying is actually going to end up helping the Trump team.
Interesting.
Here's why. Because what he was going to testify to, I would guess, is the difference, right? Basically, how an illegal contribution works, how difficult it is to prove that crime, right? Why Cohen was convicted of it, right? Why David Pecker and the National Enquirer were found liable for it, but why Trump and the Trump organization could not under the regulations from the Federal Election Commission. I got to tell you, like, I think that sort of technical stuff for the jury puts him to sleep. I think that sort of technical question for the jury just puts him to sleep. And I think that judges don't like other lawyers coming in and saying, I'm an expert. Oh, what are you an expert in, sir? I'm an expert in the law. Well, the judges usually say, shoot, I'm an expert in the law. We've got enough lawyers here. And the jury's job is not to parse legal conclusions. Their job is to figure out facts. So there have been some questionable decisions in this court. I actually think the limitations on Brad Smith's testimony probably reasonable. And I actually think it ends up helping President Trump's defense that he doesn't testify.
Let's go to the phone lines here. Tony Littleton, you're on the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. Good morning, Tony.
Hey, good morning. So a couple questions for you. One, the call being the only reference, the only proof that Trump was ever fully brought in the loop. What about that? What about the deal where they have the NDA and then the notes in Weisselberg's writing showing the $130,000, then grossing it up to cover his taxes, and broken all down in Weisselberg's writing, and then notes on showing that they're going to divide that by 12 to pay it back to, and that was a meeting with Weisselberg.
That's a good question. That's a good question, Tony. Chris?
Tony, this is an excellent question. And actually, it was something that I'm glad you called, because it was the other point that I wanted to make this morning, because Jeff and Bill asked me to kind of take a look at, hey, what's going on and how's it going? I think the biggest misstep by the prosecution was not calling Weisselberg. And they couldn't call him because of a plea agreement that they made with him in another case just before this trial started. In that plea agreement, the prosecution bound themselves and they said, we will not call you at Trump's personal trial. But Weisselberg could authenticate that handwriting on that document, right, and be walked through that, and that would be another good piece of evidence, right? So, Tony, you're 100% right. However, they've gotten that document into evidence, but the only person who said that they recognize it, right, is Michael Cohen, who said he was part of that meeting. Well, if Michael Cohen's credibility is hurt, right, how else do you get that document to have credibility? And it's through Weisselberg, especially because it's in his handwriting, but they didn't put him on the stand. So
if they've said this, that somebody's looked at this and that's Weisselberg's writing, maybe not a handwriting expert, maybe, either way, you're saying it comes down to whether the jury believes that document is truly Weisselberg's writing and Cohen's writing on the right-hand side of it. If they believe it, then that's a damning piece of evidence. If they don't believe it, then it's not.
So you got it, right? That piece of evidence is so critical, right? And there's two people who can authenticate it. One of them, you turned into your star witness, and then he gets eviscerated on cross. That's Michael Cohen. The other one you didn't call because of a plea agreement you made with him. And I think in retrospect, I would bet the prosecutors in the quiet of their mind say, I really wish we would not have made that plea agreement and let Weisselberg off the hook here.
One more question. So in the closing argument, I've heard this speculated that the prosecution at the end of the day is going to say, okay, let's keep in mind we're dealing with a porn star, the editor of a rag, a Playboy model, a fixer, and a guy who acts like a mob boss. So we got pretty seedy characters. So along the way, they're all going to have some blemishes. But that's the circle we're running in on this case. Is that a type of a type of line that you would see the prosecution using?
Yeah, Tony. I mean, hey, look, Tony. And by the way, I'm not trying to insult you here. You should think about becoming a lawyer, because I'll tell you, I think that is exactly a theme that you would put into a closing argument. Right? Don't try and make Michael Cohen a saint. Don't try and make any of these people, whiter than the new fallen snow. Just say, hey, look. The reason there's so many shady characters in here is because shady characters are doing shady character things, and one of them is sitting over there at the defense table. I completely agree with that. I just think, like when you're in that zone as a prosecutor, because of the burden of proof, right, beyond a reasonable doubt, it just makes the defense's closing argument a lot easier, right? Which is, you have to believe all these people, and how can you possibly believe some of the stuff that you've heard? You can't. Out of 12 jurors, I've heard speculation about New York juries. I think I was on a couple of weeks ago and I said I believe in the jury system. I still do. Even in New York, I don't. I think it is going to be a real tall order to get all 12 of them to say yes. There is not a doubt in my mind that that this happened, and Donald Trump knew about it, and that he did it to cover up another crime.
Tony, great call. Thanks so much for the questions.
That was an excellent call.
Let's go back to the phone lines. Frank, line 2. You're on the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. Good morning, Frank.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for coming in and talking to the boys. Really appreciate your comment on this trial. It's almost like getting an inner look or a functional MRI of the legal brain.
That's right.
And I really I'm fascinated by this interaction between Costello as a witness and Marchant. It's almost like I heard Costello interviewed, and he sounded like such a good, knowledgeable, reputable, and seasoned attorney. He's like got 40 plus years in or so. And it's almost like in his own way, he was trying to, through body language, rolling of the eyes, doing whatever, communicate to Marchant that he was not impressed by the way he was conducting this trial. And I don't know if they knew each other before, like you mentioned, or what. But then Marchant reprimanded him after dismissing the court. And I heard Alan Dershowitz say that he was in earshot of this reprimand. He was interviewed by somebody else, and he was so appalled by the whole action. He said he'd never seen anything like that.
Mm. Well, man, and by the way, I'll tell you. So, I had the pleasure of getting to know Professor Dershowitz a little bit when I was at law school, and Dershowitz. I mean, the reprimand. A judge has to try and maintain control of his courtroom. But I agree with you with your sense of Costello. I don't know Costello again from Adam, right? But I did a little. I'm coming here to do this. I do a little research on the guy. I have seen a couple clips of him. He seems like a lawyer's lawyer, right? Seems like a pretty straight shooter. You're a New York lawyer. You're going to have a little bit of an edge to you. But look, I mean, lawyers are human too, and this may have been calculated. It may also be. We don't. I've sat on the witness stand as a witness one time, and when you're up there, you have to remind yourself, hey, I'm not a lawyer right now, right? Right now, I'm just testifying. And if something happens legally, right, that you don't like, well, over at counsel table, further away from the judge, you might be able to sort of hide a little bit of disappointment, right, if you're trying to maintain your poker face. When you're right next to him, he can see it, right? So if your eyes roll a little bit, or there's a little bit of a, like that, the judge can hear it, and it's easier to irritate him.
Take exception with it. I almost think that Cohen, being the sleazebag lawyer that he sort of is, hired this guy to give himself some credibility.
Well, and then by the way, if you're
by the way, I hire attorneys to give me credibility.
You're a wise man, Jim.
I was going to say people do that all the time, and if you're listening, clients, I don't discourage it.
Right. That's
Well,
right.
it's the way you put your kids through college.
That's right.
That's right. Frank, great call. Thanks so much for the call, and thanks for sticking around. All right, we only got about a minute. Closing arguments likely next week. Give us both sides real quick. If you're planning on the prosecution, what do you say? If you're planning the defense, what do you say?
Prosecution, there's a ton of smoke here. You know there's got to be a fire, right? This guy spent his whole life getting out on technicalities and slipping through the cracks because of the way he operates. Cash payments, you have to convict him. The defense, reasonable doubt means something, and there is no way it would be unreasonable for you not to have a reasonable doubt after the testimony that you heard from the one witness who can authenticate that document that puts these payments together in the structure, Michael Cohen. He's a serial liar. He's a thief. You can't credit any of his testimony. Let this guy go.
And I think they're sitting there as a juror. If I was in that juror pool, I'd go first ever criminal trial against the president of the United States. And this is what was brought.
Right.
These are the witnesses. These are the people I'm going to hang this historic conviction on.
Well, I mean, and if I'll say this, if Trump's lawyers are feeling saucy, right, they might say, look, you guys got promised a steak dinner and you ended up at the Golden Corral.
Great way to wrap up. All right. Chris Murray, partner at First and 14th, breaking down, brilliant attorney, by the way, breaking down this Trump Manhattan case. We'll continue to have him on each week. Appreciate the time he's given us, and, send guns, money, and lawyers. That's how we
We're
operate.
going to enjoy those hats, and thanks for the styrofoam cup of coffee.
Jeff and Bill, weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on News Talk 710 KNUS.